so uncomfortable. Alright, hi there internet, my name is Breeze Ryora and I'm a witch. And I love watching witchy stuff on YouTube. I was really excited for the YouTube Pagan Challenge of 2018 to come out, like the list, because it's something I've wanted to do for years. Oh, I think my cat might be joining me. Oh, I guess not. Hello. I have been watching pagan and witchy YouTube for a long time, including like tarot readers, astrologers, things like that. And I am just so inspired by all these people and everything they have to share, and I really feel like because of the people that I've seen on YouTube, I have felt comfortable being out of the broom closet, I guess. I've never really come out of the broom closet. I've just kind of let people figure it out over time, because it's pretty obvious what I do and what I'm into, and what I study and what my lifestyle is. People in my life who judge that, I don't have time for them, whatever. But even though I've always been really confident and comfortable in my spirituality and my craft, I feel like YouTube creates a unmatched, authentic platform for people to really talk about their experience, versus things like blogging is very organized. Instagram is all about like your lips, like how good your matte lipstick looks, and I think all that stuff is important and I do all that as well, but YouTube just feels incredibly authentic. So my goal is this year, in 2018, I'm going to do the 2018 YouTube Pagan Challenge, which is the ABCs of your craft. I don't know if I'm going to go in order or not. I'll start probably in order and see how I feel, but I do want to complete everything. That's my main goal. With that all being said, I would like to start my YouTube Pagan Challenge with the letter A, and what comes to mind in my personal spiritual craft is astrology. So, I think pretty much everybody who's into like paganism or witchcraft or any alternative spirituality is vaguely familiar with the zodiac beyond their sun sign. Like, most people in daily life know their sun sign, but when you find somebody who's into the craft in any branch of it, they'll usually know more about their zodiac. So I feel like as a community we already place a lot of importance on your moon sign, your ascendant, what rules your sixth house, things like that. So for me, astrology is the go-to. Astrology is like the one unifier of all human cultures and spiritualities and faiths. Spirituality is often described as like the original religion for humans, and I really do agree with that. I feel really connected to that. I don't think my spirituality would be nearly as in depth without astrology. I mean, it infuses my spell work, it infuses what deities I choose to communicate with, it infuses how I approach what hobbies I want to turn into spiritual crafts, like art, for example. I don't just do art as a hobby. For me, it's a spiritual meditative practice, versus I have other hobbies that aren't that way, right? Like singing. I love to sing, but it's not a spiritual thing for me yet. I should make that spiritual. It's a good thought. So anyway, as far as how I got into astrology, I used to write horoscopes for my family when I was a little kid. When I was like 7 or 8 years old, we had a Windows 98 or something in the house, like one of the first computers, and I thought Microsoft Word was the coolest thing. So I would make something I called the House Herald, and I made it every Sunday, and it was everything that had happened during the week in our family. And I had little articles, or what the menu was for any dinners coming up that week that mom was really excited to make, you know. It was like that. So I also had horoscopes, but just for the signs of everyone in my family. And I would just go online and I would read a bunch of them. Like, my dad's a Capricorn, so I'd read a few of the Capricorn ones and for that week, and I would just kind of combine them or pull apart as I felt was correct or necessary, or what I understood, because as an 8-year-old there's a lot of things that I just didn't understand about astrological energy, so I just pulled out the keywords that I thought made sense to me, and I wrote horoscopes for the family. By the time I was in high school, I started to reject astrology in favor of like the very scientific way of looking at the world. I wanted to go to school for astrophysics, become a planetary physicist. That was my goal. And so I rejected astrology pretty heavily, but what was interesting was that was about the same time that I started to take witchcraft more seriously. So I think that I did kind of begin in a more, not secular witchcraft, because as I'm a Jewish person and my father's Christian, so religion was already a part of my life. But I do find it interesting that I started to reject astrology. And I don't know, one of my biggest passions is astrophysics and space exploration. And I think because I'm a Virgo ascendant and an Aquarius moon, I did have a lot of, and a Pisces sun. So I had a lot of conversations internally trying to rationalize things that don't need to be rationalized, or trying to create something observable from the unobservable. And the more I personally have embraced my divine feminine and my inner feminine, and that we don't know all the answers, the more that I am equally excited about Jupiter going into retrograde as I am about the beautiful new photos that we have of Jupiter. And which sounds pretty obvious, I think, for most people. It's like, well, yeah, of course both are exciting, but for witches especially. But for me, like, that was a process. I had a hard time reconciling two sides of that coin. Anyway, so that's how I got kind of into astrology. I've considered myself an astrologer for probably 3 or 4 years. Yeah, probably 3 or 4 years, because I've been reading tarot for about 5 or 6. And when I realized that I couldn't not grow in astrology anymore, like, because I had stunted with tarot, like I had to combine them if it was going to go anywhere else. I started to get more into it, and then for the last 3 or 4 years I've considered myself an astrologer. So now I do charts and I read for people, not full time. I don't think I'd want to do it full time, but it is like, it's part of my life. It's a very big part of my life. So what I do for astrology as far as my tarot practice, I have my notebook here. I mean, the big one everybody talks about is self-analysis, and I think that that's extremely true. Astrology is an excellent tool to reflect on who you are and reflect on what makes you you. You know, it's really easy for us to allow a lot of things to be buried in our subconscious or be ignored. And I think astrology, like, especially if you sit down and with an astrologer and go through every house and through every planet and how they're all aspecting one another, it does force you to think about yourself in ways that are maybe more uncomfortable, or ways that you've avoided thinking. Like for me, I've discovered all kinds of repressed childhood crap that I forgot that had happened to me, or that I was affected by, or that I realized I believed a certain thing because of something that happened to me when I was this age, or realizing some of my flaws. I was married once and I'm divorced, and looking back on that in the context of my star chart has been incredibly helpful in how I approach future relationships, and what my needs are and what my flaws are, and how I fall short in being a partner and how I can improve. So I think that the psychological aspect is important. When it comes to the spiritual side, I think psychological and spiritual are very similar words, but at the end of the day, your soul, your light body, and this is how I feel, your soul and your light body is experiencing this psychology. So how the planets are when I was born, or whatever chemicals are going on in my brain, whether or not I have depression or anxiety, whether or not an INFJ or an ENFP, all those things are an experience that my soul, my light body, is having. And that's how I kind of separate the line between what's psychological and what's spiritual. So with that in mind, how I use astrology in my craft, I mean, I do a lot of studying of, like, I do a lot of studying of astrology in general, but like, I do enjoy asteroids and the dwarf planets and things like that, but I guess I'll just show you my star chart. It's not that important. This is just printed off the internet and then, like, glued into this notebook. But here we go. Can you see that? Okay, so if you're looking at this, here is a natal chart. And if you're not familiar, your ascendant is over here on the east. And then on the west is over here. And this is the north and this is the south. So natal charts are flipped. They're reversed from how a compass would look. But each quadrant of the natal chart represents a different aspect of yourself. So the upper left, which would be the southeast, right, is thinking, and then sensation. I'll just point around. So it's thinking, sensation, intuition, and feeling. So you can see what psychological function dominates who you are based on what quadrant. So even though your signs and the houses change for each person, those quadrants stay the same. So if your Leo is in the thinking center, that means like you have that energy. But if you have Leo more in the intuitive center, you have Leo energy there. So that's one way to kind of marry those the psychological stuff with the astrology. But as you can see on mine, I am completely feeling and sensation with a dash of intuition and thinking last. So that's how my chart looks. The feeling and sensation are on this side, and then thinking and intuition are over here. So that's one way I do it. So I know already that my most powerful gifts are my senses and my emotion. So just knowing that for magic, I know that planning spells ahead of time doesn't work for me. It doesn't feel right. Or going off my intuition for a spell doesn't feel right. I often feel silly. But when I get in touch with how things smell or how a tree feels, or if I just go with an emotion I'm really having and I just paint that emotion onto a canvas, that's where my magic comes from. So I think that that's a really good way to figure out what can motivate your craft and what can kind of infuse it with whatever power you're looking to add. And for example, like I have Virgo, Libra, and Scorpio in my intuitive quadrant. So when the moon is in those signs, or the sun is in those signs, or whatever planet, it depends for you. Like obviously I have my own system, but you can keep track of all of these planets and what they're doing and see how they're affecting your chart, or when they match, or when they're at opposition. And you might find, well, that's why I've been feeling so like brain dead lately, or that's why I've been feeling emotionally stunted, or that's why I've been feeling overly emotional. You can find all that out just by studying the skies. So that's the first way that I do it. The second thing about how I approach magic, and before I get into like the spiritual stuff, the last thing I do to approach that is the 6th house, which rules magic, I guess. In esoteric astrology, some people say it does rule specifically magic and witchcraft. Other people say it just that's a extension of what it rules. I feel like it's absolutely true. The 6th house has your back for where your magic lies, and my 6th house is Aquarius. So naturally, I am very drawn to new ways of doing things. I'm very drawn to marrying ancient wisdom with the modern world. I'm very drawn to the skies. I'm very drawn to the element air in my craft, even though I personally identify the most with water as a water dominant person, Pisces person, Neptune dominant person. My second dominant planet happens to be Uranus, which is the ruler of Aquarius. So my being, myself, is water, but I know that my craft is kind of set up to be strong in air. And I don't know if anyone else goes through this, but I sometimes feel guilty, like my loyalty to certain parts of myself is like ashamed. So if I really am feeling a Virgo that day, I feel like I've betrayed my Pisces sun or something, but that's a different conversation. So away from the magic aspect, I do want to touch on how astrology affects my spirituality and my religion, I suppose you would say. For me, I can only connect with a deity or a spirit or an energy when I know how I can relate to them. So for example, I absolutely adore the Egyptian pantheon. I consider myself a Kemetic witch, and that's where my heart is. But at the end of the day, I can't relate to all the deities that I would like to relate to. For example, Sekhmet. I have so much respect and interest for Sekhmet, and she's actually on my altar right now. Well, let me show you. Oh, so cute! Happy Sekhmet. So I need to see where they fall astrologically for my heart and my personal self to feel attached to them, which is why Aset and Nebtet, also known as Isis and Nephthys, are my two main girls, because I do have a lot in common with them, and I do feel when I speak to Aset, when I speak to Isis, who is represented often as a Virgo energy, and I'm a Virgo ascendant, I feel called to be that person with her, right? So I connect with her, and that's where I go to her for those kinds of things that my Virgo ascendant rules in my life. So that would be kind of the day-to-day stuff, life planning, goals, all that. I kind of go to her. For the emotional side, I don't want to say Pisces side necessarily, but my emotional world, my darker world, my shadow work, I go to Nephthys or Nebtet for that, and that's where I meet her there. I think for a lot of deities that I'm really interested in, for example, Tahuti or Tot or Thoth, however you want to pronounce him, but his Egyptian name was something like Tahuti. I would love to work with him because he rules writing and mathematics and sacred geometry, the whole emerald tablets thing, like all that stuff just gets me going. But I don't feel a very strong connection there, which actually goes to why Vishnu is my primary god, who is Hindu, and that's completely out of left field. And I don't identify as eclectic, but I think that's probably what I am. Because Vishnu is this Piscean energy, and he's married to a Taurus. My mother is a Taurus, and I really, really love Taurus people. They're my favorite humans on the planet. I love Tauruses so much. So that image already just kind of came at me. But Vishnu is also depicted as a dreamer. He dreams the universe into reality. And Narayana, one of his archetypes, lays on a bed of snakes, of black snakes underneath the world, and dreams the world into reality on those snakes. And I really love that image because to me that's so Pisces, and my Pisces part of myself is probably my favorite part of myself, even though she's not always dominant, unfortunately. So that's how I connected with him so intensely, and it was astrological, really, and I couldn't shake it. And when I was in Nepal for a month and I was traveling by myself there, I just had so many encounters with him that were just world-shaking that I loved. And I'll probably discuss Vishnu in depth when I get to the letter V. So thank you so much for watching this video. I hope it was interesting for you. This whole YouTube thing is completely new to me. I'm just kind of testing it out, but I really am here because of the witchy and pagan community who are always working on their souls and their shadows. I think that's really special and important. That was my YouTube Pagan Challenge, letter A. That was such a bad A. If you enjoyed this, please leave a comment and connect with me. I have links in the description box below to all my social media stuff if you're interested. If you are doing the YouTube Pagan Challenge, please send me a link to your videos or your playlist because I want to connect with you. That's why I'm here. Let's do it. Have a wonderful, magical day, and make sure you drink your water, preferably out of a skull.